Hello, I'm Lisa Treiber. I'm from Michigan State University Extension, and I'm here today to talk about jams and jellies. There's many different kinds of jams and jellies, and we're going to talk about a couple of them today and the different ingredients that are key into making a successful product. The four key ingredients that go into making jams and jellies are fruit, pectin, acid, and sugar. And the unique thing about making jams and jellies are that it's almost like a chemistry game with you when you come to doing this. Everything has to be perfectly measured, your fruit has to be perfectly ripe, whether you're going to add acid to the product or not, all depends on the recipe that you use. And as we go through talking about this today, you're going to find that recipes aren't always interchangeable, products aren't always interchangeable. Everything has to be done just right in order to get the perfect product. You'll also find out that sometimes you can't always do one product as a freezer jam and another product as a shelf-stable jam. So it's really important that you follow the recipe exactly in order to get the perfect product. You'll find as you pick your fruit that it's not always the most cost-convenient thing, so you want to get your things when it's in season, and you want to make sure that you're getting the best dollar for the work that you're putting into it. So you really want to make this a good venture and have a good product when it's all said and done. So you have a lot of choices out there and a lot of different things to pick and choose from. We tend to select products in the pectin department that will shorten our time in the kitchen, and there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, the product turns out very good that way, and it makes it a lot easier to get things to turn out that way. I do want to state up front, if you're going to use one of these pectins, you want to use what the recipe calls for. If it calls for a powdered pectin, you have to use the powdered pectin. If it calls for a liquid pectin, you need to use the liquid pectin. Oops, they're not interchangeable. So you always want to do what the recipe calls for. The key to getting a good product again, is really making sure you have the freshest fruit. And that's going to give you the best product when you get down to the basics there and making sure what you've got. We're going to do a demonstration today on freezer jam. Freezer jam is probably one of the easiest things to do. Shelf-stable jam is very easy to do as well. And we just want to give you the two different choices to pick and choose from. But I'm going to demonstrate freezer jam today, and we're going to get that started right now. I'm choosing a product today that comes from the Sure Gel box, and only because I've done it before and it turns out for me. Lots of stories behind making freezer jam, but this one happens to turn out for me. What I've started out for today is 2 cups of crushed strawberries, and I've already crushed those before we got started. And that was easy enough to do. You just clean the strawberries, you hull them, and then you crush them, and that's easy enough. And then we're going to measure out 4 cups of sugar. And people always say, why so much sugar? Well, again, we think chemistry, think of how the sugar works today to form the gel, and it's very important that you measure accurately. Sugar is not something you want to skimp on when you're making your jams and jellies. Again, it's something that you have to do, and you have to follow the directions. So everything has to be accurately measured. So again, I'm going to measure out 4 cups of sugar. It's always good for watch for sales when you're getting ready to do jams and jellies too, so you can get the best deal on some of your products that you're looking for. Now this particular recipe doesn't call for any acid, meaning the lemon juice, so we're all set with that. One of the tips to think in mind, I measured out my berries, I crushed them, and then I measured them again, because you get different measurements when they're whole and then when they're crushed. So you want to double check your measurements when you're doing that. You stir your berries together with the sugar. Again, you're looking at this going, oh my goodness, look at all this sugar that's in here. Keep in mind, when you make jam, you're not eating gallons of it at one time. You're usually putting it on top of toast, English muffins, things like that. So portion control is always key. So we stir this together, and then what we're going to do is let it rest for a few minutes. And what happens then is the berries are creating a nice juice, which is going to help form our gel. I just want to make sure we get this nicely mixed together. Get all that sugar blended in. which just takes a minute here. And once that's mixed in, again, you're not going to disturb it. You're just going to let it sit. I'm going to set our timer. For 10 minutes. And while that's sitting, we're going to create our pectin. And the pectin is made from natural things. It's made from apples, it's made from grapes. It's not some crazy processed stuff. It's made from all natural ingredients. So people get a little concerned sometimes when they see that. And very simple thing to make. We're going to pour this into a saucepan. And then it calls for 3/4 cups of water. So we're going to pour that in with it. And then what we do is we bring it to a boil. I'll add my water to that. And it kind of looks a little bit like a gravy. It's not very thick, but it's kind of gray and not very exciting to start out with. To see it, it's just kind of clear and plain to start out with. But again, this is what helps to form the gel. And we'll get this going. And while we're waiting on that, we'll spend a couple minutes talking about the containers that we're going to put our jams and jellies in and the difference between shelf-stable jams and freezer jams and jellies. Our shelf-stable jams can go into glass jars. They're going onto the shelves, they're going into our cupboards, they're going down into our freezers, our basements, and they're shelf-stable. And the reason that they're shelf-stable is because they've been processed in a water bath canner. They're a little bit different than freezer jams, meaning that they can stay out in the cupboards or in our refrigerators. They've been sealed because they've been processed in a water bath canner for 10 to 15 minutes, depending on what the recipes say. They've been cooked, a little bit different than freezer jam, and they've been sealed. And you can look at one of the other videos that are in this set and learn a little bit more about water bath canning, and that will explain it a little bit more. A long time ago, our jars used to be sealed with paraffin wax. And you can see I've got a big do not use label on this paraffin wax because that's no longer recommended by the USDA. What the USDA has found is that the paraffin wax, I'm going to leave that sitting right there so you don't forget. What the USDA has found and research has found is that in using the paraffin wax, it starts to shrink on the seal of the glass jar. And then you start to develop little pinholes, and sometimes mold will form. That's the biggest thing that happens with jams and jellies is we get mold formation. And you think, oh, a little mold won't hurt anybody. That's not a big deal. Actually, what happens is that mold then sends little tendrils down into the jams and jellies. And it's not recommended for any soft product that has mold formation on it that it's safe to consume. So anything that has mold formed on it in a jam or a jelly should be thrown away. And of course, when paraffin was sealed on those jams and jellies, sometimes where they were stored in a basement or a fruit cellar or something like that, is not always the most sanitary place to store it. So it has to be tossed. So that's why it's not recommended. You can still find it in the stores. I'm not quite sure why it's still sold in the stores. It's kind of an oil-based product, petroleum-based product. And so we just don't recommend that anymore through Michigan State University Extension or the USDA. What we're recommending, 10 minutes in a water bath canner to process something, very easy to do. You fill your jars, you fill them with a hot product, you put them in there, you seal them with a ring and a lid. 10 minutes later, they're shelf stable. Very easy to do. If you're going to do the freezer jam like I'm doing today, super easy containers you can use. You can use these little disposable plastic jars that you can buy that seal with a nice tight lid. They run for about 6 of them, between $1.79 to $2.29 for 6 of them. Or you can buy the, it's a brand name that sells canning supplies. You can buy those products like that. And again, they're a little more expensive, but the same concept. They seal up, and you can put your jams in those products as well. Okay, this is coming to a boil now. It has to boil for a minute, so I'm eyeballing the clock over on the wall, see how long that's going to go. And then we're going to add it to our jam and jelly here. Okay, and it's gone its minute. So I'm going to pour it in. And then what we're going to do is it's going to stir until the sugar granules dissolve. And that doesn't take too long. You can almost liken it to making a Jell-O recipe where you're cooking down gelatin and you want those sugar granules to dissolve as well. Because you want that gel to set up, you're going to leave it out for 24 hours for the gel to set, and it will darken in red color. It will become a nice pretty red color. And once you've stirred this and the sugar crystals have dissolved, we're going to go and fill our containers. And again, it's just a matter of filling them. You're going to want to leave a little bit of headspace. And headspace is just enough room to allow expansion either in the freezer or, if you're doing shelf-stable jam, expansion when the food is processed. And it doesn't have to be a lot of room. It's usually just a little bit of space around the rim. And the other thing you're going to do, you're going to use a little bit of a damp paper towel or a clean dish towel. And you're going to wipe the rim off like I'm doing right here, because you don't want to leave any jam or jelly, whether you're water bath processing or freezer jam processing, for the jam and jelly to seep out of the outside of it. And that is what you're going to do. That's how you do freezer jam. You fill your containers like so. You're going to leave them sit on the counter for the 24 hours and let that jam set up. And that's jams and jellies. Thank you.